O my Lord, save my nation, save my nation, save my nation.
Salaamualaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome back to another installment of the Islam Answers book review series. I'm your host Yusuf Asghar and I'm joined by our esteemed guest Shaykh Noor Rashid. And in this installment we'll be looking at a famous work of Imam al-Nawwawi known as Bustaan al Arifin. Shaykhna, if you do the honors to introduce.
Yes, Bismillah. So this is a book covering the subject of tasawwuf by Imam al-Nawwawi rahimahullah ta'ala. As our listeners are probably familiar with, since we covered Riyadh al-Salihin before, which was also a book by Imam al-Nawwawi, or you may say a collection by Imam al-Nawwawi. People are familiar with Imam al-Nawwawi. He's one of the great scholars of Ahlus Sunnah, he's one of the great scholars of Ahlus Sunnah, specialized particularly in the science of hadith, in the science of hadith, in the science of Shafi fiqh, and also a number of other sciences. So we're focusing on tasawwuf, which he did write extensively on, although very often within his sharh, his commentary on Sahih Muslim.
Shukran lakum, Shaykhna. So if you could just give us a rundown, because tasawwuf is a very fascinating subject, but a lot of times in terms of how we perceive it, how we define it, the kind of notions that we present regarding it, it can be, they vary greatly.
Yeah.
And it can become quite subjective. So how, especially in relation to this text, how does Imam Nawawi really frame the subject?
Yeah, so tasawwuf obviously has become misrepresented, I would say, and also I would say misrepresented from both sides of an extreme. Okay, those who will attack it to a degree that it's as if it should be done away with and Islamic spirituality has no role to play within Islam. That is an extreme, an unacceptable extreme. And then you have the opposite, where things are presented as part of Islamic spirituality, ihsan, tazkiyah, whatever you want to call it, or tasawwuf. Things are presented as Islamic spirituality, which are not actually a part of it. Now, so you have these extremes. So Imam al-Nawawi, being a great scholar of Quran and Hadith as well as other sciences, he no doubt will focus on what's mentioned in the Holy Quran, in the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Personally, when I teach this text, I tend to focus on the last third. I only teach the last third of this text because he presents the discussion of awliya and karramaat, pious people, and if you like, saintly miracles or miracles that occur for people who are not prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but ostensibly pious. And I use this book in particular for that subject. And there, mashallah, he's constantly quoting from the Holy Quran and from the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Just to touch on that, Shaykh, and you emphasise the last section, especially for our viewers who might feel a little disillusioned with concepts like wilayah and karramaat, is this something that is found exclusively within the subject of tasawwuf, or is it so deeply embedded within the tradition to the extent that there's creedal implications for whether or not we accept or reject it?
Yes, absolutely. Yani the concept of awliya, or people who are pious and righteous and have a special rank with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will find this not only in books of tasawwuf, it will come up in the Holy Quran, tafsir of the Holy Quran, it will come up in commentary of hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It will come up even in creedal texts themselves. It will be the more detailed ones. It will come up there. Why? Because it's clear in the Holy Quran. It's clear in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's no denying that there is the concept of a wali. And those people who are very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have the famous hadith in Bukhari, "Man aada li waliyan faqad adhantuhu bil harb." Whoever shows enmity to a wali of mine, I declare war against him. And this is why I teach this particular section from this particular book, because there are a lot of misconceptions regarding this. There are a lot of things people will say regarding awliya that are actually incorrect. Or sometimes there are things that people will present as absolute fact, whereas in reality there's a great deal of ikhtilaf with regards to those.
And just to touch on that, Shaykh, before we move on, I just wanted to ask, how do you feel is best to translate this word wali? Because two suggestions come to my mind. One I've often heard is friend of God, and the other one that we mentioned in the beginning is the word saint.
Yeah, I disagree with both, but I strongly disagree with translating wali as friend of God. I strongly disagree with this. My solution to this issue, or concern if you like, is just to leave it untranslated. Just to say wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and leave it untranslated and rather explain the concept. Why do I so strongly disagree with translating wali as friend? Because that is neither a literal translation nor is it translation of the meaning or the concept. So I don't know where that's coming from. Whereas if somebody was to translate Khalil or Khalilullah as friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though I might disagree, I would accept that at least it's a literal translation. Whereas wali, literally speaking, wali is an ally or a supporter. And the concept of wilayah is a person who is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has a level of protection and acceptance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I would strongly push for the view that wali should be left untranslated, and we just present the Arabic for it, inshallah ta'ala. As for saint, I don't have such great issues with using saint as a translation of wali. I don't feel it's a terrible option. I do believe friend of Allah is a terrible option, but saint is not a terrible option. However, I don't know, especially when something is big in another tradition, and it has connotations and implications within that tradition, I do prefer that we have our own term for it.
You could call it creed of baggage almost.
Yeah, mashallah, it's a good term for it now.
So, and just to touch on that, would you agree that the problem is not the substance or the precedence for these concepts and these ideas within the tradition? Because as you mentioned, they are explicitly substantiated in Quran and Hadith, but the issue arises is to how we conceive of the ideas, present them. Conceive them, present them, propagate them as well, you see? So there are issues there. And this is why I feel it's so important, because so many Muslims speak about awliya or wali, such and such is a wali, for example, such and such is a wali, so regularly without ever having actually studied it. And that, as we know, is troublesome. When you speak about something you haven't actually studied, you will go wrong. If you're just basing your conceptions on what's, in, if you like, the religious culture, rather than the Quran, the Hadith, and the Islamic texts, then you are likely to go wrong. And just one final question. I guess it's a sort of two-in-one question. What is the best way to understand these concepts, and is it something, and is wilayah something that can be attained?
Yes, wilayah no doubt can be attained. One of the misconceptions I address when I tend to teach this book is the fact that the only people we can confirm are awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or this person is a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are those people who are praised in Quran and Hadith. Because ultimately nobody knows the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we want to confirm it, we need revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we have a verse of Quran or a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we can say this person is a wali. Whereas if we don't have that and it's our own personal speculation, then that must be presented as our own personal speculation and not religious fact. So I can sit here with great comfort and say, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali, these were awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I have hadith. And I have generic praise for the Sahaba in the Holy Quran as well. I can very comfortably say Sayyidah Fatima is from the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No problem, inshaAllah ta'ala. I have numerous hadith praising Sayyidah Fatima radiallahu ta'ala. But for me to say, my Shaykh is a wali, as a religious fact, that's a problem. How do I know? I don't make that decision. That comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not revealed that my Shaykh or your Shaykh or this person's Shaykh or that person's Shaykh is a wali. So there, if I must, it's probably better to refrain, but if I must, then all I can do is present my own speculative view that I think he may be a wali. No.
So there's definitely a tangibility, right, in terms of this idea of attainment?
Oh, sorry, yes, of course, yes, it's possible to attain the rank of wilayah. That's possible. Obviously, as Muslims, and certainly as Sunni Muslims, we don't believe that the rank of prophethood is attained. That's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why amongst the names of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Al-Mustafa, the chosen one. The prophets are chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are the greatest of people and the best of people and the most perfect of people, whereas to become a wali is possible.
Is that something that should be sought out? Because some people may feel, they may mean well, but they may be misinformed in terms of their intentions by seeking a particular spiritual station, even like that of a wali.
Yeah, no doubt. Ultimately, what does it mean to be a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It means to have attained great closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's something every single Muslim should want wholeheartedly.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for your time, Shaykh Noor.